For me, Corsair haven't brought out a decent case since the 4000D Airflow. Can the 2500X change that? In this video, we've got a full case tour and review, so stick with me. This could be your next PC case. 2500X is just like your mum. Short, thick, and wide. 376mm tall, 469mm long, and 304mm wide. And like your mum, it's easy to get undressed. Just undo the thumb screws and pop the sides off. The top also just pops off. There's no need to take the front glass out, so leave that alone. I should mention that the case comes in many different colorways. This is the black wood grain version, but there are non-wood variants as well. I think the pure white actually looks the nicest in the lineup. The 2500X can fit a decent amount inside it. 360mm radiator at the top, a thick 240mm radiator on the side, and a 120mm fan slot at the back. There's also three 120 or 140mm fan slots along the base of the case, although if you're using a high-end GPU, there's not going to be very much room for these. It can fit a tower CPU cooler up to 180mm tall, so that's basically all of them. GPU clearance is 400mm of length and up to 4 slots of thickness, so again, pretty much all of them. Motherboard support is mATX and ITX only, and it is back connect compatible. Do take note of the standoff positions and ensure that they line up with your motherboard. If not, you'll need a 5mm hex socket to remove it and shift it down to the next hole. It's a bit stupid that Corsair did not include a screwdriver standoff adapter for this, as quite a few users will need to move this, me included. In the cable management chamber, there are two drive sleds at the top, which you access by taking off this rear hatch and then pinching them out. One of them has a nice plastic box with all the case screws inside. You can slot in a 3.5-inch drive or screw in a 2.5-inch drive onto each sled. And there are two more 2.5-inch drive sleds inside the front edge of the case as well, though I would say cable managing these and making it look nice is going to be pretty troublesome. Back to the rear of the case again, and we've got a power supply mount. For some wild reason, they have set it up for SFX units as standard, so you have to remove the inner metal piece to use a regular ATX unit. In the center is the deep chamber where your cable management will take place. It's very narrow in here, so it may not be the easiest, especially as there are no aids to help you. And the included cable ties in the box are very short. To wrap this up, here are the cables from the front panel on screen now. The front of the case simply has the glass panel and then the wood grain piece if you chose the wood grain option. On the top you have your I/O, which is quite reasonable for a modern system. A bit like your mum pre-BBL, on the rear it's all fairly unexciting. The PCIe slot piece can be fully taken out and replaced with Corsair's own vertical mount kit if desired, but otherwise there's nothing to note here, so let's move on. We'll finish up the tour with a photo of all of the screws that come with the case. Now here is a build we've concocted with the RTX 5080 and Ryzen 7 9800X3D, and in terms of performance, as you'd expect for such an expensive computer, it's an absolute monster. For 1440p high refresh, this is really the maximum that you're going to need unless you're playing for money. 4K, absolutely possible as well, of course, on such a high-end system. You could even get pretty high frame rates in 4K as well. As you can see in Warzone, Fortnite and Cyberpunk, yeah, those frame rates are sky high. The acoustics were fairly decent, as we can see on screen now. A little bit above the noise floor and not quite as quiet as other systems, although remember when we compare systems, they don't always have the same internal parts, so it's not a particularly good scientific test. But overall, I don't think it's an excessively loud case. Even with a fairly high-end system like this, I couldn't hear it while gaming with headphones on, and that's fine really if you think about it. The only exception was that when the shaders on some games were preloading, such as Apex and actually Fortnite and Warzone as well, they're all using 100% of the CPU, which did push the temperatures up and therefore the noise, but that was only something that lasted a few minutes whilst the shaders installed. For the review, I've tried to formalize that a bit more with a scoring system, so the rubric is up on screen now. There is actually a written guide that is going to accompany this on PC36.co.uk as well, so you can see that in more detail. A perfect score would be 15, and yes, this is going to be subjective, and yes, you should watch and read other reviews as well. I'm just one person. Not everything needs to be scientific, because not everything in life is scientific. I'm going for the angle of, as an experienced builder, what do I generally think of it? As always, I'm happy to have feedback on this. Starting with aesthetics, which many will say are not important, and technically they're not for any technical scientific reason, but aesthetics are very important for the enjoyment of the system to a lot of people. Trust me, I know, I've sold them a lot of computers. On our 0 to 3 scale, I give this a 3 actually, which is, might think's a bit generous, but I'd say the look is very nice. It's true to the photos online. And I think in the right build, it could be considered a showstopper if it's to your taste. So I can't give it any less than a 3 for that. Personally, I prefer the look of something like the Fractal Meshify 3, the Lian Li O11 Vision, or Fractal Terra. They're a bit more my style, but that shouldn't detract from the 2500X, which is a really nice looking chassis. It has a premium look and feel on the panels and the filters. I really like the tiny triangular patterns and the full mesh back panel. It all looks very nice. However, the case is very thick and squat, which for me detracts from the elegance, and that's why personally it's not my preference, but I think overall people are going to like how this looks. And I think for a micro ATX case, that size would be a deal breaker for me personally. The wood elements do feel a bit tacked on, and they're kind of to hop on that trend of natural materials, and they could have been a bit more subtle or tasteful, or a bit more ingenuity about how they included it. I was going to give this case a 2 out of 3 initially, but when I changed the RGB to gold, I think this case really made sense at that point. When you have it in rainbow puke mode like we have here, because it's just running into the BIOS, it doesn't look quite as spectacular, but when you get that design language with the gold RGB matching up with the wooden accents, that's when this case really shines. There are also, of course, plain black and white versions, which in my opinion actually look as good, if not better. And if you want to, you can actually swap these wood panels out, or if you've got the non-wood version, you want to add wood, you can buy add-ons for that as well. So overall, we're giving it a 3 out of 3 for aesthetics, but it only just scrapes that perfect score, if I'm being honest. So for build quality, we're scoring a 2 out of 3. The metals used are high quality. The mesh back panel and top panel have a premium feel. The case is rigid, solid. I have no concerns over its longevity whatsoever. What stopped it getting the full 3 points was the implementation of the wood paneling. Some of the edges are slightly lifting away, which isn't ideal for a case aimed at the premium market. I think to get a perfect score for build quality, it has to get everything right. Compatibility is next, and this is getting a perfect 3 score. You can fit any video card you want in here. You have 360mm cooler support. You have 4 drive bays, enormous CPU cooler clearance. It is, of course, limited to mATX motherboards, but that's okay. That's what's intended with this case, so I'm not going to detract marks for that. You can fit any caliber of system in here without any trouble with good cooling capability. Therefore, 3 out of 3. For cooling performance, I'm going to give this a 2 out of 3. Now, this isn't scientific, but to get a perfect 3, the thermals have to be exceptionally good, such that I would be surprised and a bit taken aback by how good they are. For example, the Fractal Meshify 3 or the old Lian Li Lamcool 215, they're examples of what would score a perfect 3 for temperatures that are a lot lower than I would have expected. Like I said, it's not scientific, it's more of a general feeling, so do with this information what you will. I don't have just a high-end system that I can keep laying around just to test cases out. If you want a scientific thing, go and watch Gamers Nexus or someone that's better at that kind of thing. But the bottom line is, the cooling in this case is very good. It's not going to let you down. And in gaming, the thermals were beautifully controlled. In the stress tests, of course, they weren't as good, which is what prevented it from hitting that perfect score. But you're going to be absolutely fine in this case. But because it's not perfect, I have to give it a 2 out of 3. Finally, ease of building. I'm going to get 2 out of 3 yet again. This is another subjective matter, and it's based on how quickly could I build a standard system inside the case, and things like the layout and the cable management options as well. If a case is easy to build in, I can build a computer in it in under 40 minutes. That's not the case with this one. It was a smooth build and overall was pretty simple. The storage drive installation was easy. There were no problems getting the motherboard in or the coolers or anything like that. There was lots of cutouts for cables, fan mounts were easy to reach, etc., etc. There were no issues with the graphics card installation, any clearances or anything like that. There are only a couple of small detractions that are going to prevent it from getting the perfect 3. First, the power supply mount came with the SFX plate installed as standard. This is stupid. No one in their right mind is going to use an SFX unit in such a large case that supports an ATX unless you're recycling it from a previous build. So you shouldn't be including the lesser used version of a power supply as the standard mount. The cable management is not ideal in this case. You can do it if you plan ahead, but the issue is that because of the layout, there is only a very narrow but deep area in which to manage your cables. And then to compound that, they give you really short cable ties in the box, and I think that's really stupid. They should have given you longer ones because you're going to have to reach in and tie it all up. It's making it really awkward. But the worst part is that the case did not come with a standoff adapter, those hex socket adapters that you can put on your screwdriver to move the standoffs around. For my build, I had to move the standoff, which is fine because I have the iFixit kit with the 5mm socket attachment, but if you don't have something like this, you're going to be a bit screwed. You'd have to either buy a socket attachment or use pliers to twist the standoff out. Not ideal in my opinion. And these are the kind of things that can actually cause your components to break. You know, if you've got a standoff touching the wrong point on your motherboard, you could actually cause a short circuit and fry that motherboard. These are all somewhat minor points overall, but together they coalesce and they're enough to prevent a perfect score. So 2 out of 3 for ease of building. So overall, that brings our score to 11 out of 15. I think that's respectable, but of course that has to be contextualized with the price. This wood version came in at an eye-watering £140, with the plain black version being a more reasonable £100. The wood version is very overpriced, and it's clearly a cash grab on the latest trend of natural materials in cases. But ironically, I think the non-wood versions look just as good, if not better. And don't forget guys, for the money you're paying, you don't get any fans included either. And that makes me think of alternatives. For a budget alternative, there's something like the Vida Akira V2 that we used recently. Overall, a similar look, but only £55 with 3 fans included. Or for something slightly better, you go for the Antec C3 ARGB for around £80, which is the full ATX. Looks awesome, comes with 4 ARGB fans included, 3 of which are reverse blade, so it all looks really nice. The Lian Li 011 Vision Compact is another cool case for a similar price to the 2500X, and in my opinion, I think the Lian Li looks a lot nicer. So the bottom line, the 2500X is one of those cases that if you like the look of it and you bought it, you'd love it, you'd have no problems, you'd be a happy customer. It is a handsome young case. However, I can't ignore the price and the fact that, at least in my opinion, there are similar cases for less money. Keep subscribed to me for more, but until then, tell your mum I'm picking her up at 8. Okay, video's over. This is the feedback section. So when I reviewed the Meshify 3, I actually included the full PC build in the same video as the case tour and the review. In this video, I have not included the full build, and instead the build is going to be a separate video on its own with a montage, etc. I want to know which is better. Maybe compare this video to the Meshify 3 and see what you think. Do you prefer the build to all be integrated, or do you prefer the build to be a showcase of its own? I'm kind of trying things out to see what people like. Also, what do you think of my non-scientific scoring system? I'm sure you probably all hate it, but remember, it's subjective, and a lot of PC stuff is subjective. People try and make it very scientific and everything, but at the end of the day, if you're buying something for enjoyment, enjoyment is not really measurable scientifically. Because you've got an extra couple of degrees off your CPU, does that actually mean that you're happy with the PC? Would you not have been happy with something that looks a bit nicer, that is a different size, or something like that, something else that's more important? And don't forget guys, keyboard, mouse, monitor, all these things, they're going to make a big difference to your gaming performance, much bigger than a couple of points in a benchmark, for example. Anyway, rant over, that's all for now. Bye-bye.